Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And this is my second time recording this because I just recorded the whole thing. It was amazing without audio. So frustrating. But this is a special unstaged episode coming to you a little bit late because I wanted a little bit of time to dive into the National Association of Realtors settlement so that I could bring to you a synthesis of everything I'm learning and share with you my thoughts about what it means for our business. So the first thing, though, I want to make sure I do is I share that this is not meant to predict the outcomes of this, but provide you with background information that you can use to speak coherently about this, talk to your team about, talk with your realtors about if it comes up, and what it could potentially mean for our industry. It's simply my thought process. So, take what I say with a grain of salt if you completely disagree with me, but I just thought I'd bring to you the synthesis and kind of how I thought it could impact our businesses. So first of all, let's just back up. What happened? What has happened in the real estate industry to cause this seismic once in 100-year shift that everybody is talking about? Well, it started back last year with a couple of small lawsuits. And I'm going to put a link to what I thought was a really good outline of all of this, but a couple of lawsuits involving RE/MAX and Anywhere Realty. But then the big kahuna came along, and that was the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, which was a group of Missouri homeowners or home sellers who sued NAR, National Association of Realtors, over their policies on agent compensation, arguing that the National Association rule requiring home sellers to pay commissions to their agents and the agents of their buyers led to inflated fees and price fixing. The lawsuit also called into question another rule requiring agents to list home on the NAR affiliated databases, aka MLS, in order to sell them. In October, a jury agreed that both practices were anti-competitive, and a judge ordered damages of at least $1.8 billion. And then what followed after that was more than a dozen copycat cases, all accusing the National Association of Realtors of stifling competition and violating antitrust laws. So that's basically what went down. And just for those of you who are not familiar, the National Association of Realtors is like one of the largest trade associations in the country. It involves like over 1 million real estate agents, realtors around the country in every single jurisdiction there is possible in the United States. So this really is affecting directly staging business owners, realtors in the United States. So let's talk about this. Why did National Association and Keller Williams, by the way, they settled a little bit sooner. Why did they settle after all? Why did the settlement even come about? Well, basically it was to stop copycat lawsuits from happening. They didn't want to keep having to be sued over and over and over again, and just wanted to put a nip in the bud of all of it. So that's why they have agreed to the settlement. I'll tell you about the settlement in just a minute, but a couple of important things to note first. The first is that the settlement has been submitted to the courts and they will need to approve the settlement. But based on the other smaller settlements that happened that were similar, it seems like this is pretty much going to be a done deal. And the effects are planned to go, the planned effects will go into effect essentially in July of 2024. So at the time of this recording, we're sitting in March of 2024, and the planned changes will go into effect in July of 2024. Other interesting thing is that Home Services of America, which includes Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, is not part of this settlement. They are continuing to fight the battle. So for those of you who work with Berkshire Hathaway agents, this does not impact them at all at the moment. It will also release brokerages who are NAR members, who have a NAR member as a principal and a 2022 residential transaction volume of $2 billion or less. So if you happen to work with a private brokerage firm that does $2 billion or less, or did $2 billion or less in transactions in 2022, they are also not part of the settlement. So it does not impact every agent that's out there at the moment. This could change, who knows? But for right now, it doesn't impact every agent. But what is the settlement? What was the settlement that was made? So NAR agreed to pay $418 million in damages, but more important, it has agreed to rewrite a number of rules that have long been central to the U.S. housing industry. And those two biggest changes that we'll dive into a little bit more in detail are decoupling commissions and sharing buyer's agent compensation on the MLS. So those are the two big changes. So let's talk about what each of those are. So let's start with decoupling commissions. You'll hear decoupling a lot with this. So the current practice, the way that it works, if you're not familiar, is that when a seller decides they're going to sell and they meet with a listing agent and they determine, that that's the listing agent they're going to move forward with, they discuss the commission that the seller will pay out of the proceeds of their sale for their listing agent, for their representation, and the buyer's agent. So up till this point, a buyer has never had to negotiate and pay their agent directly. This is really important. Now, the seller decides what percentage they want to offer the buyer's agent, and then that gets added to the selling price of the house, or at least that's what people think. Now, depending on your market, that could be anywhere from 2% for like your luxury market housing, could be 2.5%, or it could be 3%. So the seller would pay somewhere between 4 and 6% of the proceeds of their sale to cover both the listing agent, the seller's agent, and the buyer's agent. Okay. Moving forward, the seller now has no obligation to pay for the buyer's agent. So they can wipe out that 2 to 3% for their buyer's agent and not pay it at all, which would leave a buyer having to pay their own agent out of pocket or represent themselves in the transaction. And buyer's agents affiliated with the association-owned MLSs will also be required to use buyer's agreements to spell out the services they provide and their expected commission rate. They've never had to do this before. Basically, it's been pretty much a loosey-goosey kind of arrangement, what it sounds like to me, which is shocking to me, actually. I can't believe it's not more formal already than what it is, but that is the case. So what really is happening right now is buyer's agents are going to really need to start positioning themselves as a valuable asset at contract and negotiation time, rather than someone who just gives you access to the houses you want to see, which is unfortunate because that is really the perception that a lot of people have about a buyer's agent. They don't tend to look at them as an expert in the negotiation process that helps them get the best deal possible when they're buying a house. So this is a little bit kind of scary to be a buyer in this market, in my opinion. Some consumer advocates have hypothesized that this arrangement will lower the price of housing. I agree with them, but I don't agree with them that this is the actual reason. I'll tell you my thoughts on it in a little bit. But mostly what I've heard from realtors is most likely the selling price will not go down, because sellers, if you are in a neighborhood where the last 3 houses in your neighborhood sold for $500,000, the seller is going to want to get $500,000 for their house, whether they're paying the buyer's agent a commission or not. So that is not what's going to bring prices down. Sellers, out of their own good heart, aren't going to be like, oh, well, I don't have to pay that money anymore. Yes, let's take 3% off my listing price that I would have paid to the agent. Some agents have also expressed that it may benefit sellers to continue to pay that commission in order to get a better transaction overall, because I think, as a professional, you're not going to want to negotiate with an inexperienced buyer at the table. That's going to make it a lot more challenging. It could be stressing people out. But then I hear on the flip side that listing agents are going to be super psyched to not have to deal with that. They don't, they're going to be competitive at the listing appointment and say, I don't recommend you continue, you pay for the buyer's agent. So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. And it'll be interesting to see what products develop. Maybe mortgage brokers decide to offer a product where that buyer's agent's commission can be financed through the mortgage or something like that. It'll be very, very interesting. But the net bottom line is that, at least for the moment, until these things get fleshed out, is that a seller does not need to pay, is not obligated to pay the buyer's commission. So the onus is now going to fall to the buyer to figure out what they're going to do. So not only do they have to come up with the down payment, they also need to come up with how to pay their realtor. So very, very interesting. So that's the first thing, decoupling of the commissions. Sharing buyer's agent compensation on the MLS is the other change. This currently, I did not know this. I found this really interesting, that the buyer's agent can see on the MLS exactly what their compensation will be if they help their client successfully take a property to closing. So that is part of the MLS information that is on there, is what has the seller decided they want to pay the buyer's agent. Very interesting. Moving forward, this is no longer allowed. However, commissions can still be negotiated externally. So if a listing agent decides that they want to convince their seller to pay for the buyer's agent commission, they're going to have to talk about that externally, not on the MLS. So it'll be interesting, because the likelihood is that sellers agents will need a new platform or automation to convey what, if any, buyer's agent compensation there will be. In the meantime, though, they're likely going to be fielding like a ton of questions about that. Text, emails, phone calls, all of that. That's going to be a part, well, probably not email, but text and phone call, right? Will probably be a part of that process. So they may be a little more stressed out. Your listing agents may be a little bit more stressed out because of that volume that is coming their way. So anyway, what does this mean for our staging businesses? Well, first of all, this settlement is going to have, as you can tell, far greater impact on buyer's agents and buyers agents versus listing agents in terms of who decides to leave the industry. So if you are worried at all about agents leaving the industry, it's not our listing agents. And we all primarily work with listing agents, not buying agents. So the listing agent is really in a very safe place here. So we are in a safe place here, and I'll tell you why. In addition to this, our listing agents may end up being the representative for both the seller and the buyer, as more underrepresented or unrepresented buyers feel like they need support in getting through the transaction process. And since there will be more unrepresented buyers on the market with less information, it may potentially slow down sales as these unrepresented buyers figure out how to submit an offer and get through contract negotiations and all of that. So for those with vacant businesses, this could lead to more passive income in the form of renewals for you. Your days on market to pending offer may be longer, and there may be fewer buyers. And the price reductions will likely happen because of that. But here's the key. There may be fewer buyers. So more than ever, someone selling their house has got to present it in the very best possible light, because to motivate somebody to jump in as a buyer who doesn't have experience and isn't sure what they're doing, that house is going to have to be spot on, amazingly gorgeous. And that is where we all come in. First of all, our marketing budgets aren't getting cut because listing agents are still getting paid. And secondly, they are going to need to entice buyers to come out into the market more than they have ever had for those who are being impacted by this. So, especially if they decide to not give buyer's agent commission. So what I am saying to you is this, that you, my beautiful friend, still should operate as you always have. Present beautiful products, create amazing experiences for the online listing photos, to nudge buyers off of their recliners to get out into the market, right? Like, they need more reason than ever to get into the market. Give it to them. Keep doing your beautiful work. Keep helping your sellers and your listing agents at the highest level. And be ready for maybe your stats are not quite as good in the coming months as we figure out how this shakes out and people figure out their way around it. But I will tell you this, based on the pandemic, the realtors that we work with at RHI who are career realtors and their brokerage firms, they all rallied, they adapted, they figured it out, and they kept rolling. That is what's going to happen right now. In fact, I saw Gary Keller was like, we're so glad to settle so that our agents can focus on business as usual. We see nothing impacting our day-to-day operations in regards to the settlement. We just wanted to give them peace of mind that they can move forward and just keep operating without the lingering, of a lawsuit behind them. So that's the message that your agents are getting. So I'm giving you that message right here that we are going to be okay. We are going to be more needed than ever, if anything at all. So that, my friend, is your sip for the week. I hope you have a wicked good week. And if you have any other thoughts or opinions, or you totally disagree with me, DM me over on Instagram. I'd love to chat about it. All right, that's it, everyone. Bye for now.